Okay. All right, so thanks for coming today. I know it looks pretty weird outside, end of the world stuff. But I guess you didn't have to go out and drive in or anything. So today we're going to kind of go over, finish the discussion of web conventions. We'll talk a little bit about some of the terms we didn't really get to last week and a little bit of history of the internet, not much, but a little bit. If we have time, we'll watch a little bit of UX fundamentals from lynda.com. I think it's now LinkedIn Learning, but there's a good video from UX designer on there that maybe we'll look at if we get time. I think some of you already saw it, but there is a new discussion in the discussions about favorite and least favorite sites. So we'll take a look at that, or I'll just introduce it. We'll look at semantic elements, which are some tags that are kind of a little bit newer. And then on your own this week, you're looking at chapters 3 and 4. So on the reading stuff, I know it's kind of a lot of reading to start out with. I mean, I'm not going to say you don't have to read it, but you kind of don't have to read it, maybe. It would be good if you had time to read it, because you'll definitely get more in-depth information if you at least skim it and take a look at it. And the exercises are pretty good if you want to practice stuff. But I'm not going to say, like, I'm not going to take quiz questions or anything directly out of page 17 or anything. So don't worry about that. But it would be good to look at. Definitely would be good to look at pages 1 through 7 of Principles of Beautiful Web Design. It's kind of about the web design process, which we'll be talking about a little bit. There's also a video here. This is from the 46th class, which is the intermediate class. I think it is, yeah. And so that's optional. But if you want to take a look at that, it just talks about typical web design process stuff, which might be helpful. And then the assignment, the regular old assignment, is another kind of follow along thing. It's text formatting tags. So same thing. You just kind of follow along with the video and then create your page. And it's more tags, basically. I saw that most of you guys, if not all, but most of you guys anyway, have already turned in assignment 1. So you already got your feet wet with that and that kind of stuff. Does anybody have any quick questions about assignment 1 or the exercise? I should call it exercise, but it was assignment 1. Kind of cleared up some things as far as tags and structure of the pages and stuff like that, right? Hopefully. Okay. So let's look at.
I do have one question.
Yeah.
So you talked about the inline. Was it inline CSS? What is the alternative to that?
So we start out doing it that way because it's kind of makes the most sense and it's easiest, I guess, at first. But there's 3 places. You'll see this really soon, but there's 3 places you can put the CSS. You can put it in the actual tag, like in assignment 1, where you say style equals. And then you can also put it in the head of a page. That's called embedded or internal usually. And then most of the time, those styles are external. So you can link them, you can import them. And that is where you'd see, like, if we go to, well, let's see, let's look at one of our pages here. Where did it go? There we go. So maybe one of the pages we were looking at last week, right? So if I view the source, Command Option U on a Mac, and then I look at the code, remember you can do that to look at the code and see what's going on. I will, let me just search for .css. So and we haven't gotten to this yet, so I don't expect anybody to know. Some of you guys know, but I don't expect you to know this yet. But .css file is the cascading style sheets file that kind of formats the page. It's the presentation layer, people call it, right? So if I view the source, you can see there's a bunch of CSS files. So if I click on that one's not much to that one, right? But there's some CSS. Sometimes they're super long and crazy. Let's see if there's another one in here. I think this page probably doesn't have a ton of it. Let me see here. Yeah, so that you're just basically taking the CSS, and this one's hard to get to too, but you're storing the CSS in a separate file. And the reason for that is so that you can link it to a bunch of pages, right? And then if you make the change on that, it changes everywhere. But that's kind of down the road. We'll get to that in a couple weeks. So for now, actually probably very soon, you'll be doing embedded styles in the head versus local styles, which are in the tag. Hopefully that answered that. I know that was probably too much information for a lot of people, but all right, so let's take a look at your web conventions thing that you guys did last week. We didn't quite get through that, but I wanted to kind of talk about that a little bit. I think we went through the first one here. Maybe we didn't get all the way through it. So we talked about where the background image is the same. I think we were talking about this one, right? The background image is the same on each page. I don't know if it's exactly the same, but it's the same. Is it exactly the same? Let's see. No, that one's a little different, right? This one's got a chimp in the back, and this one's got this design, but they all have this parchment kind of look. Maybe all these other pages are the same. I think they are the same. Yeah. So that's definitely true. Same fonts. So you definitely want to stick with similar fonts throughout your pages. There's not really a rule as far as how many fonts. More than one is probably good. Less than 100 is good. Somewhere in there, right? 2, 3, 4 fonts, something like that. But definitely different variations on the same fonts. So for example, here you got this font up here for software, and then it's also the same font that's used for links, but they're different colors, right? So it's still the same font face, but different styles. So you can use the same font in different styles. Here again, I think is the same thing with different styles, and it looks different, obviously. So you can still have variety and still use, not a huge number of fonts. Talked about the same layout at every page. So I think we mentioned layout. Let's look at this one. Layout is kind of where things are, right? So on this one, and often you talk about columns, like 1 column, 2 column, 3 columns. This one kind of goes, you could call that 1 column, but maybe 2. That's 2 columns there, and then it goes to 4 columns. So it changes throughout that page. On this page, it's kind of the same, I think, right? This one, 2 columns, pretty much. This one, 2 columns. And then this one is 1 column. So a lot of times you're going to use similar layouts from page to page. A lot of the stuff is the same, right? We talked about, I think last week, the header, this top area is the same on every page, right? Pretty much. I mean, it's the same on every page, unless, except for the current page. It's indicated by a color change there. So it's in the same place, and it's in the same, looks the same. And that's so that your user can get to know what your site looks like and how it works, right? If you change everything on every page, it's not going to be very usable or as usable. So that's good. Let's see. Both have navigation to the top of the page. We talked about why nav is often at the top because it resizes from the bottom, and we kind of read that way and stuff like that, right? And then photos on each page. So we didn't talk about photos, but definitely images can obviously make a site interesting, right? And they reinforce the message. So what are you trying to say with your site, right? This one's obviously about beer, so they show pictures of beer. This one is about Darwin and his research and genetics and things like that, natural selection. So that's what those images reinforce. And then USA is news, so that's kind of all over the place. But definitely the images reinforce or can reinforce the message, right? What you don't want to do is just put images in to put images in, because then it doesn't support the message, and it just becomes sort of decoration. You want the image to kind of reinforce what you're trying to say. But they do, draw a lot of interest. And if you see a solid page of text, you went to a web page and it's a solid piece of text, it can be kind of off-putting, right? You're like, oh, I got to read all this, and it's slower to access. All right, I think that's probably good on that. And then this is the other group, Alina's group, which I don't know if Alina's here, but so similarities between pages on USA Today, different colors. We talked about that on different pages. Most sites don't do that anymore. They used to, but not really anymore. The top menu stays the same. We talked about that, I think, already. Sticky header. Is there a sticky header on? Oh, yeah, there is. That's a good point. So sticky header means, or what I think they meant was, if I scroll, the page scrolls, but the top header area doesn't. So the benefit of that is my nav is always there, right? The logo is always there. The navigation's there. The main, top featured articles are up there. So that can be pretty cool. And we will talk about how to do that later. Not today, but pretty soon. Bottom part of the page has information, links, about, contact. So does it down here? Let's see. Yeah, so that's the footer. So most pages, or almost all pages, are going to have some sort of footer. And that's at the very bottom of the page down here. This one has kind of a sitemap at the bottom. It also has privacy policy, about, things like that. A copyright. I think you guys mentioned that too, right? There's almost always a copyright at the bottom. Footers can be big with a lot of stuff, or they can be pretty small. Like this one just has a copyright and acknowledgements there. The beer one, what does it have? It has this sign in for the email club, hours, contact information at the bottom. So footers can have different things in them, but it's pretty much kind of contains the bottom of the design. So that's good to notice. We talked about similar fonts. We didn't talk about search. So typically, if a site does have search, it's going to be somewhere in the top-ish part of the page, and often it's going to be in the header and maybe in the top right. These don't have that, I don't think. Where's USA Today's search? I don't even see.
It's the microphone.
Oh, there it is. Yeah. I didn't spot it right away. So, yeah, and it's going to be, often it'll have like a little, glass thing. And then similarities with all websites, information is in the center. So that's typical. We will see how to do that. Used to be, when the web first started, the page would fill the whole browser, but that's when monitors were smaller, right? Now people have giant monitors, so it would be really weird to have or maybe not very useful to have a web page that went all the way across a giant monitor, because it makes it hard to read, right? You're like, I can't figure out where I'm at. So typically websites will have a sort of a maximum width, and then they'll be centered too. In this one, you can see in USA Today, the header goes full width, kind of. Let's see. Yeah, well, not really, but this bar goes full width, but then this header goes wider than the content area down here, and then the rest of the page, I think, all fits. Sometimes the footer will span too. So this has a certain width to it. I can go right-click somewhere. Remember, I can inspect, and in the inspection tool, if I can select the whole sort of center area, you see that? So it says main, and then it shows me this orange, and I can't do both at the same time. It says the orange part out there is kind of the outside. It gives me a width of 1140, I think. So that the max width kind of thing part for this site is 1140, it looks like. I can also go to computed here and then roll over, or I can do it here too, I guess. I can roll over that. That is, if you guys can see that, you probably can't, 1020. So that's 1020 pixels wide. Let me get this out of the way. So I think the other part was the padding. This is padding out here. So you can roll over different parts of this container and see, this is called the margin on the outside. There's a border, there's no border there. There's the padding, and there's the content. We will talk about all that. If I haven't talked about it in the video, you'll see about that really quickly, but basically the content is the middle part, and then the padding is space around it. And then maybe there's a border, maybe there's not. And then margin is space outside the entire container. So long story short, what happens is usually when you have a larger browser window like this, you're going to center your content, and we'll do that too. And that makes it seem like you're using the space. If you can think about, actually, I could probably change this. Let me see. I might not be able to find it, but real fast. Yeah, here we go. No, that wasn't it. Yeah, I can't really find it. It would take a while to find. But if I put this content all over on the left, it would feel like this weird, awkward space on the right. But when you center it, it just feels more, normal, better use of space. So you'll see most sites are kind of centered. Let's see. So centered, scroll down, obviously, you can scroll down. Widths of pages can be different. Like we just saw, it could be, 1200 pixels, something like that, but there is no specific height because people scroll, you can scroll, right? So sometimes it'll be one screen full, sometimes it'll be more, sometimes it'll be a lot more. Depends on the page. So there's no set height for a website, but widths, there are some kind of standard widths. Somebody had a question, maybe? Thought I heard something. No. I can't really see all you guys. So if you have a question, go ahead and speak up, I think. Well, I'm talking about this stuff. So let's see. I'll have access to menus, categories. All of them have copyright. We kind of said that. Most websites do have a contact page. That's true. So you can contact someone. Depends what kind of site it is, but all have a home page. So yeah, probably. So one thing about websites is you access them in different ways from different directions, right? It's not like it's a non-linear type of arrangement, meaning usually I draw this. Maybe I'll try to draw it in a minute, but it's a top-down hierarchy, right? So you have a home page, and then you split down and you go to different categories, and then you keep drilling down, and it gets wider and wider as you go. But someone could come in to your website on any page. So if they come in on not your homepage, you have to make sure that there's good signage and everything, right? So if I came into this page here, that's the homepage, right? But somebody could do a search and arrive through this page instead. So you have to make sure that you have good signage and orient the user, I call it. An analogy that I use is, say you came, you come into an airport and you get off a plane, not that we do that anymore, but you get off a plane and there's a bunch of signs, right? Baggage claim, gate 4, ground transportation, stuff like that. Imagine if you got off the plane, came out of the gate, and there was no signs anywhere, right? What would you do? You'd be like, you have no idea where to go, right? So that's kind of what happens when, and some beginners tend to have a tendency to do this. They'll put good navigation on the homepage like this. There's a navigation bar and everything. And then they'll, on maybe the software page, they won't put any navigation, except maybe the homepage or something. And what happens is the user doesn't know where they are. They don't know what else is on the site. They may not even know what site they're on. So that's another reason to have this header, sort of basic identifying stuff. What site you're on, what are the main sections of the site on every page, because you never know where they're going to come in, right? They could come in from any page. They may land on this page first. So every page has to be able to stand on its own. That's really important. All right. I'm skipping a little bit here just to get through here. All of them have a color scheme and a font type. Yeah, so true. Well, usually, right? We talked about USA Today has kind of a schizophrenic color scheme a little bit because they have been doing this color coding of their content for years. But most sites will have some sort of scheme, right? This one is kind of earth tones, right? Reds, oranges, brown, yellows, browns, kind of dark sort of earth tones or light earth tones. This beer site, It's kind of black and white mostly, right? There is a splash of green, but I think it's mostly black and white, right? But there's a lot of color in the content, so that's a little bit different. But generally, you do need some sort of color scheme, meaning some plan for color. You don't just want to say like, well, I like blue, I'm going to make it blue, right? You should have a reason to do that. And we're going to do that later too, talk about color schemes. You guys will come up with color schemes for different companies, kind of a little exercise. Another beginner mistake that people make is when you figure out how to change color of the background of the page, people like to just change the color between their pages, which is probably not a great idea, right? Why would that be? Why would you not want to change the color of every page, the background color?
I'll disorient the user.
Yeah. It makes it, if you go to a different page and it's a different color, you're like, am I on the same site? I don't know, I guess, right? So the color is an important clue that like, oh, I'm still on the same site. I still know where I am, right? If you change a lot of stuff, including the color, people are gonna think they left.
Right, instead of changing the biggest background color, you could change some of the accenting on the page instead.
You can, but usually those stay similar as well, usually. Yeah, but you could, yeah. Okay, the last group, is this the last group? Or maybe there's two groups, right? Let's just see if there's anything different here. Similar fonts. So a lot of you guys came up with the same things, which I kind of expected. All headlines are bold. So headings are bold by default, and that gives them more visual weight. Probably some of you guys have heard of the term visual weight. Visual weight means how much does it attract the viewer's eye? So by default, you saw this in the first exercise, right? Heading level 1 is bigger and it's bold, and that's supposed to draw the viewer's eye to that a little bit. That's kind of the idea. Now you can change those styles with CSS, but that's the idea. So visual weight is an important thing to think about. Like, where do you want the viewer's eye to go? How do you guide their eyes? Tags beneath each article preview are all in all caps. So that's some formatting stuff on the USA Today page, I think. Advertising placement, that's a pretty good point. USA Today. So a lot of times you're gonna see ads over on the right sidebar. That's pretty typical, not always, but a lot of times. That's sort of the least valuable space, right? If we said we're looking at top left to bottom right, then the right is a little bit less important than the left. You will see ads at the top a lot. I know those get annoying, right? You ever see the giant ads at the top and they take up half your screen? That, yeah, that's because that's where you're gonna look, and then they want you to see that kind of stuff. So page impressions and ad impressions and things. On each page, there's a hero story with the largest pictures and 3 smaller pictures. That's from USA Today. So let's go to sports. Yeah, kind of true, right? So there's sort of a featured article with a larger image. We call that kind of a hero image. We'll do those later. Talk more about those later. And then a large heading, right? And then a few smaller stories underneath. And then you can scroll down, and these pages go on a long way, right? There's lots of stuff down here, but yeah, that's kind of true. And then similar between all sites or different sites on the web. Logos top left, we said that. Titles and body copy are separate. So that's a good point. So headings or titles, right? Headings, navigation, headings like this, they are different from body copy. So body copy, if you've never heard that, is a term that just means like the main text of the page, the information. So that's called body copy. So you do want your body copy to look different than your headings, obviously. Sometimes people will accidentally make the whole page bold, all the body copy bold. Why would you not want to do that? Probably a couple reasons. Anybody have any ideas?
I think
Overwhelming. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it pertains to what you were talking about with visual weighting.
Yeah. So if everything is, well, yeah, pretty much. Yeah. So if everything is bold, how are you, you're accenting everything. It's like yelling, right? Same with all caps, kind of like all caps, right? So you want to have different looks for things so that you can emphasize certain material, and headings are, Usually you want people to see headings so they can know what they're going to be reading if they keep reading. The other thing about bold text, which is a reason you don't want to make a whole page bold, is it is a thicker stroke on the letters, right? So that can actually make it a little bit harder to read. So bold text is not meant for body copy generally. It's not designed that way because it would be a little bit, if you time somebody reading a page full of bold text versus not, it might take them a little bit longer because it's not supposed to be as readable that way. Or it can be less readable, let's put it that way. Copyright is in the footer. We talked about that. Menus have a hover state. I think we mentioned that, right? Where you can give some user feedback. I don't think yeah, that does there. Yeah, that's true. And backgrounds are all simple, so people don't lose focus on the main content. That's a good point too. You want to have backgrounds that are not too crazy so that they don't distract from the content. That's very important. That's a very good point. But they can also reinforce the content, right? So we talked about this one, the DNA one, how it has this sort of parchment background and it has these sort of drawings. Another similar thing maybe is, well, sort of similar, I guess, the style of the imagery, right? So what's the style of the imagery for this page? These look like
pencil drawn.
Yeah, well, yeah, or woodcuts or something, right? Which would be appropriate for that time, right? 150 years ago or whatever it was. If you had regular sort of beer pictures, if you had regular sort of images on this page, photographs, that would look not as cohesive, right? It wouldn't make as much sense. So the style of treatment, people call it the treatment of the images, should be similar throughout the whole site. A lot of times it's just framing and size, right? All these images are the same size. They're all color. Even if this was black and white and these three were color, that would be a little bit like, well, that kind of doesn't kind of go with it as well, right? So that's something about treatment of images. All right. Almost done here. Vertical scrolling, we talked about that, I think. Yeah. Color schemes, yeah. Logo on the top left. Use of images, we talked about that to convey quickly about the site. Copyright at the bottom. Navigation horizontally. Sometimes it'll be vertical, but often it's horizontal. Depends how many links you want to put in there too. White space and simple background. So that is on a couple of these, right? So white space, and this isn't white space, it's black space, but you could talk about it being negative space. So negative space means, it's kind of an art design term that means space where something isn't, right? Empty, sort of. So here you've got this negative space here, negative space there. Here you've got some negative space. Doesn't have to be a lot. Space here between these two areas. Space here, space around. So that all gives the eye, helps guide the eye a little bit, and also gives it a little bit of a chance to relax, right? If there is something everywhere, and next week we'll look at these horrible websites, well, you might say they're horrible, where there's no white space. It's all just solid stuff. And you're like, I can't look at it because it gets hard. So white space is important. And the classic example of that is Apple's website, right? They're all about white space or negative space, right? If you look at Apple's website, which a lot of people cite as a well-designed site, I don't know, it's up to you, but probably most people would say it's pretty good. There's a ton of negative empty space. So what does that do? That really focuses on their products, right? Here's an iPad, here's a phone, right? Tons of negative empty white space. People call it clean too, right? It's clean. And that's part of the white background. You'll see a lot of e-commerce type sites where you're selling something, which is a lot of websites, right? Will have a white background for a couple of reasons. It makes it seem clean and organized. It also doesn't contrast with the product, right? If you put a colored background back here, if this was say green, it would make all these products look like a different color a little bit because your eye kind of adjusts a little bit. Like this morning, I went out and took a picture of the orange sky, and my phone adjusted, thinking it wanted to fix the white balance, and it wasn't orange in the photo. That's what your eye does similar things. It kind of adjusts to colors. You don't notice it, but it does. So, okay, almost done here. Content little. Yeah, I think we said all that kind of stuff. All right, good. Sorry that was if I went rushed through that, but I think you guys did come up with a lot of the same stuff, which is I kind of expected, right? And that's what conventions are all about. Anybody else have comments about something that we didn't mention that you thought of later? Anything like that? Not yet. Okay.
When you said
Oh, go ahead.
You said white background on e-commerce sites just now. I was like, I don't think Amazon has a white background, but after checking, they actually do.
Yeah, their page is pretty busy. That's the opposite of clean, right?
Oh yeah, a lot of content.
Well,
What the hell? Hell?
GG. You lost connection.
Hello? Okay.
Sorry for the technical difficulties, guys.
Yeah. It's all good.
hey, I'm back. Sorry. What happens when you got 4 people on the internet at the same time, I think.
Oops.
You guys am I still sharing here? Let's see. There we go. Okay. Oh, paper towels. Yeah, everybody needs paper towels. So yeah, it's kind of white. It's back here, right, in the products and stuff. Yeah. Somebody else was gonna say something, I think, before I got cut off.
I think that, I don't know if we talked about this, but I think that each website is sort of, they've done their research to gear it to their public. Like the Darwin one, you can tell that it's, a little vintage with all their pictures. The USA Today has that newspaper effect feel. And then the beer one, just with that dark, it might be geared more to like men versus women, right?
That's true. Yeah. So that's true. So target audience is something you need to think about. So if you have never heard that term before, target audience is who you're making the site for. So some of them are more specific, right? If you're making a site about Darwin, you might think that your target audience is people that are interested in science or natural selection or evolution or whatever. Little more focused, right? If your site is USA Today or Amazon, that's a really broad target audience. So it's going to be a little less, it tends to be a little less specific on the design. The design is more bland, even if you want to think of it that way, because it's not as targeted, right? If you look at, and we'll talk about this more later too, but if you look at sites, portfolio sites for designers, they're often pretty kind of wild. I don't know if that's a term that you would use, but their design is more experimental, adventurous, right? Who's the target audience for a portfolio site?
The target audience for a portfolio site is mostly artists and designers alike.
Yeah, so it could be other artists, could be other designers, could be art directors, could be people that you maybe want to get a job with, right? Maybe they work at a creative agency. So those people are harder to impress first, and they may have a more sophisticated kind of visual literacy, right? They're used to seeing things that are a little bit more out there. So that's going to be a different design than Amazon, which is designed for the most possible number of people, right? So you have to think about who you're designing for. That's actually in that section, the video about, and you're reading about the web design process. So that's good. Okay, let me skip over to some of these terms because this came up actually already. And I'm going to start from the bottom because that's kind of what we have been talking about a little bit. So here is a, I think you guys can see that, right? Yeah. Here is a typical layout for a website. You got the logo in the top left. You have this header, sometimes called a masthead or a banner area at the top. It may have an image in it. It may have search in it. It may have some other information in it, but generally there's some sort of header up at the top, right? Then typically there's going to be some navigation. Not always, but often it's going to be some navigation, right? And that might be using the nav tag, which we'll talk about. Then down below that, you're going to have, you know, your basic content. This is a 2-column design. There's more than, obviously, many more layouts than this, but this is a very, very typical design. You'll have some content, the main information about your page or your content for your site, and then maybe a sidebar with something related. And then at the bottom, you're going to have a footer. Very typical, right? So we'll do this layout pretty much, or variations on it really soon. But that's some typical things you'll see. So a few other terms that I wanted to go over from this. This is the terms article or file that's was under week 1, which we didn't get to it last week. Right here, terms. So that's the file that we're looking at. So some design terms, we've already mentioned a lot of these conventions, something that's kind of commonly accepted or done, right? Consistency and unity and continuity are all kind of talking about the same thing. Basically making your site look similar enough page to page so that it's usable and feels cohesive. So those kind of terms are all kind of about that a little bit. Metaphor, I don't think we talked about, right? So if we look at, I'll get you Amazon. Okay, there's at least one tool metaphor on this page. So what is a metaphor? A metaphor is some signifier that represents something else, kind of a familiar item or process that helps you understand how something works. So an example would be, I know some of you guys are Windows and some are Mac, but where do you put something if you want to get rid of it on a Windows machine or a Mac machine? You want to get rid of something. What do you do with it?
Recycle bin.
What was that?
Recycle bin.
Recycle bin on the PC, right? On the Mac, I think it's just trash. That's weird. The Mac is less environmentally friendly, I guess. So you put it in the trash or the recycle bin, right? So that's a metaphor. There is no trash in your computer, right? There's no recycle bin. It's just to help you understand what to do with stuff, right? If you are looking at a piece of information, it's often called a file. The whole computer thing is a desktop metaphor, right? Meaning you have a real desk with stuff on it. What do you put on your desk? You put files on it, right? So you have files on your computer. Where do you put a bunch of files? If you have a bunch of files together, what do you, on a real desk, what do you put them in?
In a folder.
Yeah, a folder, right? A folder or a directory, you know, it's called, I think, on a PC sometimes, but a folder, right? So that's another real world metaphor. Like, I have a bunch of files. What do I do with them? Well, I put them in a folder. What do you do on the computer? You have a bunch of files, you put them in a folder. So same thing, right? So there are metaphors used on desktops. There are some metaphors that are still used on websites. What is the metaphor being used here on this page? And I have to give you a hint because there's a lot of stuff on the page. Near the top right.
A cart.
A cart, a shopping cart, right? So a shopping cart is another metaphor. There's no shopping cart here. Well, there is eventually, but there's no shopping cart on the computer, right? There's no shopping cart going on here until you order something. But that's just to tell you that, okay, if I want to buy something, what do? I put it in my shopping cart. Or sometimes I have a shopping bag if it's like a, clothing store or something. Another part of that e-commerce thing is, if you think about how many times have you gone into, maybe you do more lately, but how many times have you gone into a real brick and mortar store and filled up your shopping cart and then just not been able to, you don't want to check out, so you just left. You just left the shopping cart sitting there. You don't really do that, right? Not very often anyway. They might not want you to come back. But people do that all the time on the web, right? You put stuff in a shopping cart and you're like, forget it. It's too hard to check out, or I don't have the money, or I was just, collecting stuff. So that's called conversion on the web. And that's a big problem, right? Is you don't want people to fill up a shopping cart and leave. You wouldn't want it in a real brick and mortar either. So yeah, that's another thing about similarities between shopping carts, I guess. Okay, so that's a metaphor, some tool metaphors. Some other tool metaphors. If you want to, I think we saw one earlier, right? If I want to find something on the USA Today site, I use search, which has a metaphor that's this magnifying glass, right? That's another visual metaphor. Another one is if I go to a story and I want to, I don't know if it's on these pages actually, but let's see here. Yeah. What does this mean? Email. Yeah. So if I want to send this story to someone, it means email. So typically an envelope means email. That's another tool metaphor, right? Most people know that. Now those can be confusing. Like if you have some weird little icon and not everybody knows what it means, then that can be a problem. So one example of that, and more recent, I guess, is, let me see, I thought I saw it. Maybe not. Sometimes you'll see it. I don't see it. I thought I saw it. Maybe here. Yeah. Okay. What's that? It's a menu, right? It's the navigation menu, or some kind of menu collapsed. So a lot of times it'll have. Say that again.
Isn't it standard to use triple dots?
Yeah, often it's 3 lines instead of 2, and people call it the hamburger menu, right? Was and probably still is kind of a controversy about those kinds of menus, and that was because we kind of became a convention, but it took a while for people to figure that out. Like, I don't know if you'd know, if it wasn't a convention, would you know that was supposed to be a menu? Like, it just looks like 2 lines, right? But people have learned that over the years that that means navigation menu, collapsed navigation menu. So there's a lot of kind of stuff like that.
If you look in your browser to the right of the URL bar on the far right, there's also one in Chrome. The triple dots on the very far right, next to the address bar.
Over here somewhere?
Yeah, right there.
Oh yeah, well that's another type of that's sort of a more information kind of thing. That's another icon for that. You're right. I see that a lot. And here's the hamburger menu on Amazon right there. And that's sort of a pop-up or a flyover menu. There's different kinds of ways you can do it. Yeah, okay, good. We talked about orienting the user, let them know where they can go all the time. You want them to be able to know where they can go and where they are. Talked about the airport thing, right? Target audience, we mentioned that too. Who you're making your site for, you need to know that. So a lot of website design or UX design especially is to getting to know your user and what they need and what they want to access. And remember that you're not designing, part of this idea is you're not designing for yourself usually, unless you're just doing a site for literally for yourself. A lot of times you're designing for a company or a group or something, and you're designing for the user. You want to give them what they want, not necessarily what you would just like to give them, unless it's really your site, like a personal site or something. Peer level is just a term that means pages that are the same level down from the home page. So on this site, on let's say USA Today, peer level would be these like sports, entertainment. The home pages for these sections would be peer level pages. That's all that means. The layout we kind of mentioned a few times. That's the overall design of the website, like the arrangement of text, illustrations, graphics, things like that. Usability means how easy is a website to use. So that's important, right? You've all been on sites that were hard to use, and it's kind of torture. So that's what that's about. We'll do some testing stuff later on that. Part of that is readability. So how can you make readability bad or hurt readability? You can use text that's too small. You can use a font that's not really made for body copy. A lot of fonts are not made for body copy. They're made for headings, maybe. So if you set a whole page in some crazy font that's hard to read, that's very bad usability, right? We'll look at that more too. Navigation, we've mentioned that term, but I should have kind of defined it maybe better. It's moving through a site. Links is also, it's also used to refer to links. And then global navigation is navigation that's available all the time. That would be these guys, right? I think those links are always there, sports, entertainment, life. But if I go to a certain section, you may get what's called secondary or contextual navigation. So if I go to entertainment and then I look down here, there's movies, celebrities, TV, music. That's just for this section. So that's called contextual or sometimes secondary navigation. Depends where you are, right? These don't depend where you are, and these do. That's generally what that's about. Non-linear, we kind of talked about that. People can access your page from anywhere. So let me see, I could probably try to draw here. This is probably gonna be horrible, but let me try here. So is that working? Yeah. Look at that. It's like, I mean, I'm about ready for kindergarten here. So let's say that, you guys can see that, right? I think. Hopefully I'm not just seeing it. So that's kind of a layout or a breakdown of the site or a site map or yeah, site map probably. So non-linear means not, like I said, not everybody's gonna come through this page, through the home page. They may come on this page and they may arrive on that page and they may arrive on that page or that page. So you have to make sure that every page has that orientation, that navigation, that look that's consistent throughout your site so that you know, they know where they can go and what site they're on and what their choices are. So that's what nonlinear means. It's kind of user-defined experience. That's another term you'll hear, meaning the user decides how they experience it. It's not like other media, like there's also linear media. So linear media would be something like a movie, right? Or a book where you start at the beginning and then you go the middle and then you go the end, right? Websites don't work that way often. You skip around and stuff, right? So it's a different type of way of thinking. So yeah. Okay. And we already did this already. So I wanted to give you guys a little chance to, let's see, we got about 10 or 15 minutes. I was going to say something just really quick about sort of the history of the internet and some terms and things. But let me give you guys, I'm going to put up a whiteboard and see if I can make this work here. I'm going to go share again. And this time I'm going to put up a whiteboard. And I think you guys can draw or type on here. So I'm going to give you guys sort of just a super short sort of pop quiz, what you know about like the internet and the web and stuff like that. And I think you guys can all access this, right? Can you guys type on there? Somebody try typing. It's going to be chaos, I realize, but maybe you guys can't. Let me
Nope.
see. No, you
Not-
can't.
We do have the option to annotate, but I don't know if that's visible to everyone.
You know what? We could probably just do it that way. Let me close this whiteboard. Probably should have tried this before. Let me just put up a actual white thing. Word page. Now,
Uh-oh.
Okay.
Fell victim again.
Rose again.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Frozen?
Yep.
Goodness gracious.
Guys.
You keep cutting out, Professor.
What? Ooh.
I don't think we have the bandwidth to have everyone access the screen at the same time.
Quite possible.
So, what are we going to do?
Hey, I don't know. I think that may have been on my end. I'll have to check out what's going on here. Let me try that one more time. I want to see if you guys could annotate on there. Okay, see if you guys can type on there. Aha, it works. Okay. All right, so let's see if this works. I'm just going to experiment here and hopefully it won't crash again. So I'm just going to ask you a couple questions and then you guys type a quick answer. So approximately what year did the internet start? Or kind of, approximately.
Well,
Wait, you're not saying it. You're typing it. Sorry.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, just type in your answer. Try to type it on the screen or yeah.
Excuse me, I cannot type. How can
You
I
can't
type
type?
on this? No, I cannot.
At the click on the little menu at the top, and then
Yeah, if you go to your Zoom menu, there should be an annotate button, and then you hit that, and then
Okay. Honors. Okay, good.
there's a little caret at the top.
yeah. So you should be able. Everybody should be able to click on the annotate button, and then there should be a text option. if you can draw the number, we're just looking for the date. You could try drawing it. It might be hard with the mouse unless you have a pen or something. Oh, somebody made that. Somebody did it. They drew it.
Should be in the top center. You'll see a green thing. You are viewing Mark Garrett's screen, and then next to it, it says View Options, and there's a little caret next to it. Click that caret, and then you'll see Annotate.
Oh, I just wrote on there accidentally. I got to turn off. We're all experimenting. Everybody find it? Most people found it, looks like. Some of you guys write as badly as I do. I know it's with the mouse. If you had a lot of coffee, it makes it worse, actually.
The only thing I remember discovering was that the World Wide Web was invented in relation to CERN, the Large Hadron Collider. I forget why.
Yeah, that's the web part, but we're talking about, so I did say, I should have emphasized that. So we're talking about the internet and not the web. Maybe you guys were saying the web. So, yeah, so the internet itself started in the 60s, actually.
Oh, 1969.
Yeah, so like 65-ish. And I would share this page I have, but I'm already sharing this Word file, or Word screen anyway. About 65, the Defense Department started working on something called ARPANET. And it was a way to distribute communications because what was going on in 1965? Cold War stuff, right? So they were worried about nuclear war, which would be very bad. But they wanted to make a way that was redundant so that you could still communicate. So that's kind of where it came from, was from the Defense Department anyway. So I'm going to draw in here for a second too. It'll be bad, but let me see if I can get this to work. No. There we go. Okay. So this is my drawing. You guys can see that, right? So this is kind of my the way I draw the internet. It's super fancy. That looks terrible. But anyway. So the idea was if there was a nuclear war, then if these two were connected directly, right, and there's a war and it knocks out that communication line, then how are they going to talk? So the idea was sort of to make this redundant system where you could have things go this direction, that direction, bounce different ways, or maybe that way and then that way. And that would make it more redundant. So that's kind of why it's kind of robust a little bit, because there's a lot of ways for things to get around. That involves the use of routers. So routers are hardware that routes information or routes data, right? What's the big router company in the Bay Area? They made their money from routers originally, a lot of it. Anybody know?
Cisco?
Yeah, Cisco. So Cisco's routers, or that's what they used to be. But so that literally routes information through the internet. So if you think about these guys are ISP providers, or they have fast connections to the internet, that's your ISP. That's a term, right? Internet service provider. And then say you are here, right? And you talk to your ISP, and then your aunt is over here and she talks to her ISP. So it depends on the speed of your connection depends on your connection to your ISP, and then your ISP's connection to other ISPs and your aunt, right, I guess. So let's say this is your aunt, right? And then this connection between her and her ISP, she lives out in the middle of nowhere, and she's on a dial-up connection, which probably none of you guys are on, or you wouldn't be able to be on this call, actually. So a dial-up is, maybe you've heard of it. It makes that horrible sound, right? You use a phone line and it literally sends the data as sound that is translated between sound and digital information. So believe it or not, there's still like a decent percentage of the country is on very slow connections like dial-up. I think it's like 20%, 15 or 20%. And that's because they don't have, you know, fiber or fast or Comcast or whatever out in the middle of nowhere typically. So one of the things that you need to think about, if this is you want to make your website or your communication as small as possible, your images, for example. You want to optimize your images. If your aunt is trying to look at your website and your images on your website that she's getting through the internet, right, are big and heavy, meaning big file size, they're going to come in really slowly and it's not going to work very well and she's going to get frustrated and leave, right? So part of what we'll study or do is optimizing images, for example, to make your page more responsive or perform better. Performance is a big thing right now because websites have gotten so kind of big and bloated that they can be slow to use, right? And then if websites are slow to use, then people get frustrated and they may leave, and that's part of the problem. It's always been, that struggle's been going on forever. But anyway, so we were talking about the internet. So the ARPANET, which is the DoD project, started about 1965. So some of you guys probably thought I was talking about the web, which is a different thing, right? So back in the 60s and 70s and 80s even, you would type. When you were on the internet, you would type, right? That's how you send information. So the actual World Wide Web started around 90-ish, 91, 92, somewhere around there. And that was at CERN, right? A particle physics laboratory. And anybody know the name of the guy? Type it in, don't say it out loud. Type in the name of the guy who's kind of the father of the World Wide Web. Anybody know that one? So type in the name if you know it. He was a guy at CERN, which is a particle physics. Yeah, Al Gore. Yeah, Al Gore claimed he invented the internet one time, I think. That was a famous problem. Anybody got anything? So that Tim Berners-Lee is the guy. So that was about 91-ish. And so he wrote some of the first code, HTML stuff that you guys are doing. To kind of share information about particle physics, I think, like images and things like that. Like I said before, it was all basically text. So this stuff has only been around for less than 30 years, 30-ish, a little less than 30. So it's always changing. It's very fast. It's very young, right? If you hear people say, "Oh, I've been making websites for 40 years," they're lying because there were no websites 40 years ago. Probably lying. So yeah, it's all pretty new. All changes pretty fast. So about 93 was when the first browser was kind of developed, called Mosaic, and that browser eventually became what?
Netscape.
Netscape, yeah. So yeah, about a little bit later, and that was the first really popular browser. Mark Andreessen did that. Around 95, you had things like America Online, CompuServe, and Prodigy. Anybody ever, you guys aren't old enough probably. So those are kind of walled gardens. Let me stop sharing this screen here. We could probably stop sharing that one. Let me share the rest of this. You guys see that, right? So 95, you've got America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy, MSN Network from Microsoft, and Microsoft released Internet Explorer. So America Online, CompuServe, Prodigy were kind of walled gardens, kind of closed networks. And the web was kind of outside. It was kind of the wild, kind of unruled, crazy internet was the web, right? You had all these walled gardens. You kind of have that happening again. Well, it's already happened. You kind of have that happening again now with things like Facebook, right? Or apps like Facebook, Instagram, Snapchat. You got people in apps more than they're on sort of the open internet, right? So there are people that, believe it or not, probably not most of you guys, but that spend pretty much all their internet time inside of Facebook, right? They're looking at news inside of Facebook. They're talking to people inside of Facebook. It's kind of like we're back to this America Online kind of days. And that the problem with that, or potential problem, is, right, that you're only seeing this one, window of things instead of everything. So, but that's about 95. America, those companies are still around. Some of them, America Online is, Microsoft obviously is. So that's just a little bit about the history, but the point is kind of that it's very new, and it's changing all the time. It changes fast, right? Changes really fast, almost too hard to keep up with. Last thing I wanted to, since we're kind of out of time, is tell you just to check out the rest of that terms page. I know it's pretty dry, it's all technical stuff, but we will hit a few more of those terms on Monday. We missed a day this week, right, because of the holiday, but we'll finish up with that. And then we will look at the video, a little bit of the video stuff that I was talking about today, but we didn't kind of get to it, but I don't want to keep you guys past, really. Do take a look at that discussion forum. So there is a discussion forum called, oops, it's not showing up there. Favorite and least favorite sites. A couple of you guys have already posted. So all you're doing on that is post the name of a site that you use, but you don't like it, but you use it anyway, and tell us why you use it. And then post the name of a site that you do like and tell us why you like it. So we're looking at reasons people use sites, and we're also looking at what you think is kind of like makes for a good design or a pleasurable design or a pleasurable to use website. It doesn't have to be all design either. It could be something else. So, and we'll take a look at that stuff on Monday. Yeah, I think that's about it. Sorry, I talked too much again today, but we were kind of behind a little bit. Does anybody have any questions or anything?
You know what else is interesting? Internet Explorer used to be a very popular website back in the early 2000s, and I was still a child at the time, but
Yeah.
once Google Chrome became more popular in the early 2010s, Internet Explorer had gradually declined its
True. Yeah.
popularity.
Yeah, that's true. But it is a good, that's a good reminder to, you do want to kind of look at your website in multiple browsers. So if you can install at least Firefox and Chrome, those are the two most popular ones. And then if you're on a PC, so I'm looking at browser share. If you're on a PC, you can use Internet Explorer, but also Edge. So this is Internet Share according to StatCounter, which is one place I've seen it. So it says, this is global, I guess, right? Global, yeah. Chrome is 65%. Safari, that can't be right.
That's crazy. Firefox
I don't think
used
that's
to be like
right.
20.
That's not right. Hold on, let me show you one other thing. Then I'll let you guys go. So you can actually see the statistics for your own site, if I can find it here. Yeah, here we go. Let's look at the statistics for Mission College. This is analyzing the Mission College website using Google Analytics, which I'll show you guys again, but how to use it if you want. But so this is sort of a dashboard. You basically install, put a little bit of code on your pages, and it tracks users and what's going on in your site. So I can see that Mission College right now has 31 people on the website. And I can see, like, it's been going up and down, what time people came, all kinds of stuff, where they came from. I can see locations they came from, what time of day is popular. Looks like about 10 o'clock to 2 o'clock, that kind of stuff. But I can also see, it's in here somewhere, technology, here we go, browser and OS. So here I can see what browsers people are using to access the site. So according to this, and this is just the mission site, according to this, it's Chrome about 55%, Safari, wow, Safari. So that's probably mobile Safari then. 29%, Firefox is 3%. That is weird. Well, anyway, that's surprising. I would say that you definitely want to have Chrome to use on your, as you look at your websites. Safari, there is a I don't think there is a PC Safari. Is there still a PC Safari? Does anybody know? I know it was available on PC, but basically a Mac thing or iOS thing. Firefox is available for both. Edge is PC only. That's Microsoft Edge. And then Android is on Android phones. Internet Explorer, that's really old probably. Samsung Internet, that's some Samsung specific browser. But the point is, look at your website in multiple browsers because you really don't want to design for just one browser. What you don't want to have happen is the website looks fine and then you look at it in a different browser and it's all messed up, which happens. So just look at it in both browsers. And then another quick thing you could do, last thing is when you're looking at your site, see what it looks like when you resize, right? If somebody does this, like they're on a phone or a tablet, they may see it like this. And if they're on a small laptop, they may see it like this. If they're on a big desktop thing, they may see it like that. So you want to kind of see what your design does. And we're going to go over all that stuff too, so don't worry about it. But just get in the habit of looking at your site. Don't just look at it maximized on your desktop all the time, because that's not going to give you a good, accurate look at it. Okay, I think that is all we have time for. Monday, I'm going to get you guys more involved and have you guys talk again with each other and stuff. A little more active stuff. But do you guys have any other questions before we take off for today?
I would definitely recommend Chrome, Firefox, and other more recent web browsers for web design because they are popular nowadays, but they tend to have a much faster internet connection than Internet Explorer that I used to have as a kid.
Yeah, they can be a little faster. One other thing I'll show you real quick that you kind of remind me of is it's called Can I Use? And what Can I Use is a way to, I'm going to look at this CSS grid thing. So CSS grid is kind of a little bit newer part of CSS that we talk about a lot in the intermediate class. And it's just now becoming kind of out in the wild more, meaning on actual websites. It's a CSS feature that's a little bit newer. So what's Can I Use does, and you just look up Can I Use and you'll find this. It tells you when that feature of CSS or HTML or code basically was supported by the browsers. So here's all browsers, right? i.e. Edge, Firefox, Chrome, Safari, etc. And then if it's green, it means it was supported and it tells you when that happened. And if it's red, it means it wasn't supported or isn't supported. So that's a little clue to tell you like, well, if I was going to use this, this CSS grid layout thing, it would not work for certain people that had these older browsers, older devices. Maybe they're in, Europe uses Opera a lot, at least they used to. So maybe it wouldn't be as great in Europe. So things like that. And it tells you information about that. So that, that is true that newer browsers are going to obviously work better for lots of things. So, and it's good to keep them updated too, because security wise, they're always being kind of plugging security problems in browsers too. So, all right, anything else?
Thank
all right,
you.
guys. Well, thanks a lot. And I'll see you guys Monday. And
Thank you. Have a good one.
Make sure if you have questions in between now and Monday, you can post them in the discussion forum question area, and then we'll get to that But if not, I will see you guys on Monday.
We'll see you Monday.
All right.
Okay, bye, Mr. Garrett.
Bye.
Have a good day. Thank you.
You're welcome. Hi, Chi. I'll see you later.